Mhm. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Graph Webinar Wednesdays, and thanks for joining me on Building Synergy from a Diverse Team. I'm Linda Montalbano, so I hope you guys are all doing well. All right, so I wanted to start today with sharing an activity that we do here at Graph at the beginning of many of our modules, but in particular this one when we teach this in a classroom. And I want to share this with you because it kind of sets up the next hour for us, the next 60 minutes. So, one of the activities we do, and it's a lot of fun, and if you don't do activities at the beginning of any of your, you know, classroom modules, please do. They're great for getting everybody energized and thinking about the day. So, it's called Interview the Expert. And what we do is we break up the classroom in groups of three. Everybody is in groups of three, and everyone in each group has the opportunity to be the expert. And you have 60 seconds to be the expert. And while you are the expert, your partners, the other two participants, they ask you as many questions as they can about your expertise. Now, what are the expertises? Well, we make up all kinds of fun expertises. So, for example, you might be an expert in skydiving, but you teach elephants how to skydive. You might be an expert in laser eye surgery. However, you are an expert in laser eye surgery for earthworms. So, we have this, it's literally 60 minutes each round, or sorry, 60 seconds each round, and everyone rotates. Everybody has the chance to be the expert. And like I said, you have 60 seconds to ask that expert as many questions. I think you guys have the idea. So, what I want to share with you is I have observed this activity happening hundreds of times. And it's a great little social experiment because I love watching what is happening in the room. And what is happening in the room is something we rarely see today. And that is people are really engaged in their conversations. And of course, there's a ton of curiosity, right? So people are curious. They're very curious to hear what this person is going to say, what they're going to come up with, basically. There's a lot of laughing. So there's engagement, there's laughing, there's curiosity, there's eye contact. It's amazing. It's something we don't see a lot because what we see is people on these a lot. People are very these days distracted by their phones. We are all distracted by our phones. The human attention span, they said years ago, had gone from 12 seconds to 8 seconds, and a goldfish is 9 seconds. We're actually at about 3 or 4 seconds now. So our attention span has actually decreased even more over the years. So to actually observe this in a classroom, and that is exactly the way we as humans are meant to interact. This is how we get our self-actualization, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But instead, today we get our self-actualization from likes on social media and followers and basically digital self-actualization. We're not getting it as much from other humans, which is why humans crave interaction. That's why concerts sell out, why restaurants are busy and we're supposed to be in a recession. Everybody is out. People need to see each other. We saw what happened during the pandemic, but most importantly, people need to connect. We need to connect. We are hardwired to connect. And the reason I share this activity with you is because it's a reminder to us operators. This module today is about, I want you guys to just sit back, relax. I just want you to be self-reflective. And that's all. This is an hour, 60 seconds for you to be self-reflective in your role as a leader, and something we don't take the time to do often enough. I want you to be introspective, self-reflective, and think about your mindset as a leader, as you navigate your journey as a leader, managing frontline. So as operators, we're responsible for taking corporate strategy and executing it flawlessly through the front line. That's what we do. On any given day, we are consumed with giving directives implementing initiatives, teaching, giving knowledge, but it's always pushing information, always. And what we have to be aware of as leaders is, are we spending enough time pulling? Are we spending enough time asking questions? Are we spending enough time connecting with our people? Hence that activity, interview the expert. There was a lot of asking questions, a lot and curiosity, which is something that we, including myself, we all have to remind ourselves to do, especially as leaders. We have to, more now than ever, connect with our people to really understand the value that they bring to our organization, the values that they bring, the value that they bring, to their teams. And this is the only way that we can create synergetic teams, is really understanding, basically what value every individual brings. So that's, how I want to start today, is really just talking about how important it is just to connect with your people. And I use generational differences because now more than ever, I mean, we have four generations working together in the workforce. I mean, the boomers aren't retiring anytime soon. Gen Xers, we're still in a lot of leadership positions, not retiring either. And we have the biggest cohort, millennials, and now we have Gen Z that's occupying a lot of the entry-level positions. So we have four generations working together. And I like to use generational differences, although there's many other different kinds of diversity. I like to use this because this is very predictable historically and in challenges in organizations in regards to creating synergy among teams. So let's get into this. For example, according to the HRPA, 75% of managers find that overseeing multi-generations is challenging. And also according to the HRPA, 60% of organizations experience intergenerational conflicts. Of course. I mean, think about parents and children, think about grandparents and, grandchildren. And this is a very normal human thing. And 32 years ago, when I came into the workplace, when I entered the workforce, the same studies came out. So I was Gen X coming into the workplace, into the workforce, and the boomers and the traditionalists held all the leadership positions. We were the ones that were cocky, entitled, lazy, that was us. So it's interesting how all the same studies come out, for every generation. And the thing is that generational differences are predictable. I think the biggest message is that we have to break that cycle as leaders. We definitely have to break the cycle of stereotypes. And it's really important to understand that different generations, whatever generation you fit into, faces oversimplification and inaccurate stereotypes. So it's something that we as leaders need to always be aware of. So have you ever done any of these? And it's so important to be aware of this. Judged others basically solely on age, complained about members of other generations, made assumptions of individuals based on their age. I have tried to prove their values, your values are more valid, focused on someone's negative traits. We've all done this as leaders. We've all done this. This is normal human behavior. We do this to each other all the time. We do this in our personal relationships. We do it in our work relationships. It's human behavior, but it's something that as a leader, and I think if you've been on any of my webinars, you've heard me say, once the chooser makes the choice controls the chooser. Once you make a choice to be in a leadership position, these types of behaviors are things that we have to be very aware of and pay a lot of attention to, because it affects the energy in our workplace, because we bring the energy as leaders. So the thing is that if you've done any of these things, even if you don't, verbalize them, but you're thinking them, this is the thing, that it's your unconscious bias. So you navigate with your unconscious bias. And sometimes you're not aware of how you're conducting yourself, facial expressions, tone of voice, anything. And what happens is people, your teams, coworkers, they become very closed and very resistant. So it's something, and I often hear frontline staff make comments like, yeah, that's, they think this. And I'm like, well, why would you say that? Did they tell you this? No, I just know. I just know. I can't even, if I had a dollar for every time I heard that, I just know, because we're humans. And, we do wear sometimes our emotions out there. So sometimes we don't even have to say anything. Our unconscious bias comes through. So these are things that we really need to be aware of. So human nature. What's the most important thing about you as a person? Well, we are hardwired, as I said earlier, we are hardwired to protect and to connect. We want to connect with people. That's where we get our self-actualization, but we also want to protect. We want to protect our values. We want to protect our beliefs. This is normal human behavior. You saw it in a different scale during the pandemic. You see it in the current political environment. You see how people hold on to their beliefs and values. And the thing is again, going back to us as leaders, if we believe that our beliefs and values are more valid, and we're not trying to understand someone else's beliefs and values, which is a non-negotiable as a leader, we have to learn and understand and ask and listen to really understand why with every person that we work with as a leader. That's our responsibility. If we don't do that, then we're creating a fixed mindset. And if we have a fixed mindset, then we create a lack of trust in our work environment. We create a lack of engagement and collaboration, right? Because people shut down. As leaders, we need to have a growth mindset. So we can have our beliefs and values. And I can't tell you how many times I've said it. I've said it. I'm guilty of it. We all have probably said it at one time or another, which is like, I never did that. How come I never did that when I came into the workplace? I basically came in, I never got trained. I worked hard. I came on time. I didn't ask for the vice president position within 2 weeks of being in the organization. I mean, I can go on and on and on about all these, their beliefs and our own values, but we communicate them not realizing the impact that they have. And like I said, even if we don't verbalize them, but we think them, it affects the way we lead. So the bottom line is we always have to be in growth mindset. So curious, always trying to understand. This is what I think. However, I need to understand why you think this way. I need to understand why you show up this way. It's absolutely crucial to building synergetic teams. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the generational breakdown. So every generation comes from a different political, social, economic, cultural background. And everything we were exposed to from birth to the second we come into the workplace, whatever age that's at, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, everything that happened in between those years affects how we show up in the workplace. So from our, the parenting style we were exposed to world events, to, as I said, everything socially, economically happening around us through all those years, what happened in our schools, what happened on our sports teams, that groomed us, that shaped us to basically have the values and beliefs that we do and why we show up the way we do. It's impossible to think that everyone's going to show up the exact same way. So, and then when you have the generational differences, it even adds, another layer that we have to understand. So I want to go through each generation and I want to break down sort of what each generation was, exposed to as, they came through. So let's start with the first generation, the boomers. they came through a very, and I'm going to use my cheat sheet because I've got some new good information. Boomers, they came through a very robust economic time, post-war economic boom. So many advances in medicine, and there was industrial expansion. Corporations were revolutionized. It was always about climbing the corporate ladder, and it was about making more money and being promoted and buying a house and buying a bigger house. They lived to work. That was the mindset because there was so much opportunity. Also, the generation with the highest divorce rate because work took over everything. Things were important, having a big house, having a car, having, a nicer car, all of these things, and having the status and having, that recognition for working so hard. So but on the other hand, there is so much experience and wealth of knowledge with this generation because of they built companies, they built organizations, and saw so many changes and had to adapt and had to, work in teams to build. So they bring so much to the table. But think about what they were exposed to. That's Tuco. But think about what they were exposed to. So that shaped them. Then you move to, and by the way, boomers are 60 years old to 78 years old. So they were born between 1946 and 1964. Now you move to Gen X. Okay, so they are your 44 to your 59-year-old. I fall into that category. So born from 1965 to 1980. These were the latchkey kids. They had jobs 13, 14 years old. This also was, though, the first generation with computers, with PCs. So they are and can be tech savvy, exposed to a lot of different world events as well. Fall of the Berlin Wall, 1989, collapse of the Soviet Union in 91, went through 3 recessions, energy crisis. But this was a generation that figured things out. Their parents were working parents, or they were divorced parents, but they were latchkey kids, most of them. I was one of them. And they had to figure things out. They came home when the street lights, came on. They weren't monitored, and they just had to figure, they went and got their part-time jobs on their own. Their parents didn't get their jobs for them. So this is a very highly independent generation. And again, as I'm speaking, remember that these are, they're stereotypes. They're not necessarily true for everyone because within each generation, there can be a lot of differences as well, and we'll get to that. So that's your Gen X. Then you've got Gen Y, the millennials. Okay, so they're 1997 to 2012. They're 81 to 1996, and they're between the ages of 26 and 43. So they're the first generation on smartphones. Think about this. They were born with an iPad in front of them. So imagine, like, everything is at the push of a button for them. Hence they can be very impatient, especially if our companies, are technologically advanced. Everything is at the push of the button for them. They started careers, and this is important to know that they started careers, right after a recession in 2008, the younger ones, which impacted, their earnings. They had high school debt. So this is also why this generation is really delayed, certain milestones in life, getting married, buying a house, having children. So they're having them later in their 30s because it's been more difficult to build that wealth. Unlike the boomers did really early on, because companies were, expanding and growing, and industries were expanding and growing, and there was so much opportunity. So think about their primary source of communication is the mobile phone. That wasn't the case with the boomers, wasn't the case with the traditionalists, and it wasn't the case with the Xers when they were younger. That happened later in life, like in their late 20s, early 30s. So actually, and even in our early 30s, it wasn't the primary source of communication. We were still using the telephone. So I remember all my conference calls being on a landline. So, there's very distinct differences socially with every generation. This is also the generation, it's very important to remember that they were raised by the helicopter parent. This term was coined by this generation. So remember, when they played sports, every kid got a medal. When they got in trouble at school, it wasn't their fault, it was the teacher's fault. When it was, when something happened out in the field, it wasn't their fault, it was the coach's fault. Authority was questioned all the time by parents, because parents bubble wrapped, their kids and wanted to make sure that they had every opportunity to succeed, unlike the path that wasn't paved for them, right? We always tried to change the next generation based on what we didn't have. They value experiences. So where the boomers valued things, these guys, this generation values experiences. They love going to concerts. They like going out for dinner. They're craving that social interaction because we've deprived them with this. So they also are the largest. They also have there are a group. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. They're the group that has the largest percentage of entrepreneurs, and actually so does the next group, the Gen Z. So that gives you some insight into what so far these generations were exposed to. Gen Z, 1997, born 1997 to 2012, they're 8 years old to 27. So they were raised by Gen X. So a lot of them are quite independent, contrary to popular belief, because they were raised by independent parents. They grew up with a lot of turbulence and instability. The pandemic. So during a lot of milestones, when they should have been like in first year university, they experienced first year university in their home, in their bedroom, online. Many didn't go to their grads, their high school grads. So a lot of instability. They are shaped by the social and digital world. I mean, they're addicted to YouTube and Instagram. And many other apps that they use. AI, they're exposed to now another, digital platform that just keeps changing by the second at the speed of light. Highly educated group, also very entrepreneurial. In fact, this is important to know. It's 34% or 84%. So it's 34% prefer to work in small businesses. And it's interesting because they see the opportunity to learn a trade and then maybe start their own business, as opposed to taking traditional, educational paths of becoming a lawyer, doctor, going into finance. They actually would rather own their own business, and they're willing to work in a small business, learn the trade, and then start their own business. And I actually see that trend a lot among my kids' friends, and my kids are 20 and 21. And I see that trend among their friends. They're working for friends, family businesses. They're learning the business. They're learning the trade with the hopes of someday opening their own business. And they actually love it. And they don't care that, they're working in a small environment and it may not be glamorous. They want to learn the trade. So Kevin and I hear a lot from retailers, like they don't want to work. They want to go work for a big company, or, they want to go work for the Lululemon, or they want to go work for not necessarily. Not necessarily. So if we can really talk about and promote and this is a side note, but if we can really promote the opportunity within learning how to run a business as an entrepreneur, you can really attract great talent. This generation has a lot of financial concerns, which is why you probably see people quitting if they're not making enough money. Cost of living. I don't have to get into that. There's social issues, so many social issues. So it creates a lot of instability, mental health. Obviously, crime is up in North America. These things, social things, actually impact the mindset, and they impact the mindset of our workforce. So they panic and they have insecurities. So they've got to make more money. And if you're not paying them enough, they're going to quit. It's not because they're lazy, and it's not because they're entitled. And we have to think about these things. These are all the things that we have to take into consideration. So I hope that gave you a little bit of background on, every single generation and what they were exposed to. And it becomes even more complicated because there's cultural differences that, impacted these generations. And there's, also people that have come to Canada that may, there's ESL, there's so employees, there's so much. So this is why it's so important for us to really understand each individual and, understand the value that they bring. So I want to do a little activity. I'm going to open the chat, and I want you guys to use the chat and just write really quickly your comments. We're going to really go through this quickly. So I want to go through the ugly, the good and the not so good of each generation, and just it kind of gives us insight into how we think. So right now, if we were to think about a baby boomer, so that's someone from 60 to 78 years old, how they show up in the workplace, what's the not so good? What's some of the things that we observe that we're like, this needs coaching? Just enter it into the chat. Just start recording into the chat. What do you see with this generation? Anything at all, just enter it into the chat. So you're looking at somebody from 60 to 78. I can start the chat. One is usually they want to be respected for all their knowledge and what they bring to the table. And if they're not, they don't like that. Oh, hold on. Oh, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Hold on. All right, hold on. All right, I'm not seeing anything in the chats. Are you guys entering your comments in the chats? What's happening here? View. Hey, Kevin, I'm gonna get my IT guy. Hold on, because I'm not seeing anything in the chats. Can you guys see? Can you guys not enter anything into the chats? Kevin? Hold on one second. Hold on one second, guys. I don't know what's happening. 1 second. Hold on. Kevin? Kevin? Nothing's coming up on the chats.
Oh, well, can I tell you right now, sorry, we're having a tech issue.
Yeah, I don't know why, but nothing's coming up in the chats. So they're raising their hand. So
Yeah, you might not be able to do chat.
I might not be able to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, they're raising their hand. So I think that there's.
Yeah, sorry, chat's probably been disabled.
It's been
somehow.
I
had it going yesterday. My apologies.
Okay.
So I'm not sure.
Sorry, guys. Shoot, we can't do this activity.
Chat's disabled.
Yeah, the chat was disabled.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
Okay. I'm sorry, guys. The chat's been disabled. So we can't.
I had it working yesterday. I don't know why it's not, but I don't know how to do it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, guys. Little technical difficulties. Apparently, the chat was disabled. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Okay, I'll do all the talking. So typically we do this activity where we ask you what is the good and what is the not so good about each generation, based on your observations. And so I'll review some of the things that typically come up on the chats, and I'm so sorry that the chat's not working. I really apologize for that because I'd love your feedback. But so for example, boomers. What we typically hear in the not so good is always that, well, they that, like I said earlier, they really want to be respected and they want to be acknowledged, and which is great, but they can become very indignant because of their wealth and knowledge. And so, their way is sometimes the best way because they have so much experience. So that's one of the things we see. I also hear they're not very tech savvy. I hear that, which can be very frustrating for, someone else on the team. The good, I hear they're hardworking. I hear like they are so dedicated and loyal. So I hear that all the time. So with the Gen Xers, I hear often with the not so good, that they want to do, like they're basically so independent that they're not team players, that they're very impatient, with everyone else because they'll just like, I'll do it myself. So not really good at, empowering. So that seems to be, well, because we know they're a very independent group. But on the good side is they work fast. They are problem solvers. They figure it out. So I often hear that on the, good side. So moving to the millennials, I often hear, they can be a little entitled. They're a little impatient. Because again, they move at the speed of light. So they're very impatient, with other people on the team. They're entitled because, well, they've had their path of success always paved out for them. So they come in and they want that path paved out for them in the workplace. And if it's not, they become impatient, they quit, or they just don't put as much effort in. Some of the good here is they are always questioning. They are always questioning the status quo, which is so important. Previous generations never did that. They're forcing us to be better employers. So they come in and they're just like, well, I should be coached. The training program, should be like this. And where is my succession plan? So they hold us to account, which is a huge positive. But sometimes it comes off as in, lack, or I shouldn't say lack, but it comes off as entitlement. And it's not entitlement. They actually care. They just need a lot of attention in their growth path, which is really important, which is the previous generations didn't. And so there's this disconnect. And then you have Gen Z coming in, and Gen Z, well, they come in and I hear the same things that I hear about millennials, and because they're very closely related. They've kind of grown up with very similar social patterns. But they come in and again, they are impatient. They, question everything, but almost with a little bit of disrespect because they, again, are so used to questioning authority. And they want to be involved in everything. They want to be involved in, decisions. They want to know the bigger purpose. They want to understand everything, which can be very frustrating, but these are all positive things as well. So they show up in the workplace. Every generation shows up in the workplace, and the things that are not so good and the things that are good, there's a reason why. And it's important for us as leaders to understand that why. It's important for us to understand why they're showing up that way. Because if we understand the why, then we can better communicate with them, better connect with them, better engage them. So that's why it's so important. And I'm really sorry that the chat didn't work because you get a lot of interesting feedback on this, but I think you guys get the idea of that everyone is going to come in with their beliefs and values and conducting themselves in a certain way, but there's a reason why on both the good and the not so good. And that's really what you have to take away from that. So I want to share with you, oh, geez, having a lot of technical difficulties today. I want to share with you how everyone shows up in the workplace. And you can take pictures of this with your phones, but I'm going to quickly go through it. So the boomer, overriding observation, questions, policies, rules, cautious with change. We know why they're cautious with change because they've been through so much change and experienced so much. Gen X, change policies, change is good. They're very good at adapting, very independent. Gen Y, make up new policies and rules. Change equals improvement. They bring a lot of new ideas that we need to listen to, that we need to understand and involve them. Gen Z, change is good. Rules must be transparent. They want to be part of everything. Key workplace behaviors. Boomers, they're hard workers or workaholics. Authority is challenged. They're very people focused. They're very team oriented. Unlike Gen X, they eliminate the tasks, not impressed by authority. They're very impatient, very results focused, and work very independently without supervision. Whereas Gen Y, they're really good at multitasking. They're not impressed by titles. They're impressed by competence and care. That's not there, but they are impressed by a leader who cares. They're very technology focused. They work independently with supervision. So that's really important to remember. They work independently with supervision. Digital natives, Gen Z, grew up with tech. So again, everything has to be fast for them. And they're moving back to working more in teams. What's important to them is who they work with. Their team that they work with is so important in retaining them, which is why building synergy in your team is so important. They could love the company, but if they're not happy with the team, the people they work with, they'll leave. Views on feedback and rewards, obviously the boomer, money, title recognition. We know why. Gen X, how am I doing? Freedom is the best reward for them. And Gen Y, whenever I want, at the push of a button, meaningful work. They want, and this goes for Gen Z as well, they want to be connected to a company where they believe in the purpose of the company, the vision, the mission of the company. They want to be doing work that is, something beyond themselves. Gen Z, they demand more frequent and shorter feedback. So on the fly feedback, they need it all the time. Think about this generation, both of them, Gen Y and Gen Z, they've always gotten feedback from their coaches, from their teachers, their parents. The previous generations did not. So you can see why the need is different from these generations. Purpose equals rewards for them. They need rewarding work, and rewards should be also personalized, not generic. That's very important to them. The message that motivates each generation, obviously the boomer, you are valued and needed. Again, they bring so much to the table. Gen X, do it your way, forget the rules. Gen Y, you will work with other bright and creative people. And of course, Gen Z, they value individual expression. There was one on our webinar yesterday, he said, Gen Z's very opinionated. So I would say that that was one of the not so good, but it's really, they want their self-expression valued. They want to be heard. They want to be listened to, which is really what this whole webinar is about. Work and family life, no balance, live to work for the boomers. Xers, balance is good. Balance is mandatory for Gen Y. And for Gen Z, and this is really important, the line between work, home, study, entertainment is blurred. So as leaders, we just think we've always managed people's work environment. Today, especially with Gen Z, we are managing their life experience. We're not just managing their work experience, because for them, their work has to be just as purposeful as anything outside of their work life. So, which is why understanding them, getting to know them, connecting with them, finding out, what motivates them is so important in retaining them. Loyalty, baby boomers are loyal to the team. Gen X, loyal to themselves. Gen Y, loyal to their peers. And Gen Z, loyal to peers and themselves. If you start to really look at all of these slides and the differences between all the generations, you can 100% connect it to everything we talked about earlier when we talked about sort of what these generations were exposed to. So you start to understand, as they went through life growing up. So you start to understand the why they show up the way they do in the workplace. And that's what's important as leaders for us to understand. So again, human nature. We tend to focus, and this is in every aspect of our life, this is human nature. We tend to focus on liabilities, right? We tend to focus on what needs to improve, what could be better in everything, whether it's in our homes, whether it's in our workplace, whether it's with the people in our lives, our significant other, whether it's our employees, whether it's our boss. We continually, and again, human nature. So we continually focus on people's liabilities. And the thing is that sometimes we may not think that we are focused but on liabilities as much as we are, but we are. There's always been that 80-20 rule where you focused 20% on, what people need to improve on and 80% on their assets. What we've observed, like I've always observed, is that's a struggle for most people because we are under the gun to achieve so much that we're constantly focused on what needs to improve with individuals, with teams, and again, with organizations. And this is a human nature that as leaders, we need to fight, that we need to be really aware of, and again, be self-reflective, be self-aware of what we spend our time doing. Because when we focus on liabilities with our employees, and even if it's just under the guise of we're trying to improve their performance, what happens is people become very closed again. It affects their self-esteem, it affects their contribution, and it affects their relationship with you, and it affects their relationship with their managers. So it's very important for us as leaders to stay focused on that 80-20 rule and stay focused on being aware of liabilities and how we coach those liabilities, but ultimately spend our time on looking at what is the value that these people bring. So what are their assets? So this is where as leaders, we need to spend our time. And the only way we can do this is if we actually spend the time with these individuals, getting to know them, our managers spending more one-on-one time with their employees, us spending more time with our managers as district managers, spending more one-on-one time with them, and spending more one-on-one time with our frontline teams. So really understanding who they are and what they bring to the table, the assets, the values that they bring to the table. Because the liabilities are based on, or the opportunities are based on everything we've been talking about today. So as long as we understand the why, then we can better coach them on those areas. So it's better to focus on the value that they do bring. So as leaders, we need to be looking at each individual, what they bring, and then taking our teams and publicly acknowledging what each person brings, what Sarah brings, what Rob brings, what Josh brings to the table, publicly acknowledging it in front of the teams, and then working collaboratively with all of their assets towards a common goal. That's ultimately the key to creating the synergetic teams. But we have to understand, it goes back to what I said from the very beginning, who they are, why they behave the way they do, why they conduct themselves the way they do, why they show up the way they do in the workforce, before we can even, utilize and value those assets that they bring. It's very, very important. So we have to spend more time asking, listening, and connecting. And this is the only way that we can keep everyone focused on a common goal and the role that they play in achieving that common goal. So the truth is that the generalizations and stereotypes and finger pointing has always and is creating a divided attitude that is adversely affecting collaboration and productivity. Our view of generations has little basis in science, and generations are more alike than we actually think because we're all human at the end of the day. We are forgetting that there are normal generational traits. We were all young, cocky, naive, entitled, and that is so true. Because when I look at the behaviors of a 20-year-old or a 22-year-old, I think back to the way I was, and I was probably a lot like that, maybe a slightly different, but a lot like this. And we talk about that, and we catch ourselves actually in social situations going, we're telling our kids, don't do this and don't do that, and we're like, we did all that. And you start to hear it, in your life, but it's no different in the workplace. There are significant differences within each generation. And this is really important to understand. There's also significant differences within each generation because of life stages. So you can't stereotype, because you can't just say young people, because the oldest millennials in the early 40s. And at this point, they've probably bought a house, they have a mortgage, they're married, they're having children. So their life stage is the same almost, and has sort of the same stress as even a boomer who still has their kids coming home from university. Now their kids are at home, and now they're dealing with their kids, still can be dealing with a mortgage and still dealing with life stresses. So there's a lot of similarities within, a lot of differences within a generation, but a lot of similarities with other generations, which is very important to also be aware of. So we can't stereotype. That's why it's important to get to know each individual one-on-one. All right, so some tips. Now that we know what we know, how do we attract, hire, manage, and retain? The two generations that obviously comprise most of our workforce now, the millennials and Gen Z. So to attract them, very simple. Make sure as a company that you have a strong company brand and company vision that you clearly communicate all the time. You connect. When we want everybody moving towards that common goal, this is what you're connecting them to. You have social responsibility in your organization. This is important to these two generations. Wasn't so much with the boomers and the Xers or even the traditionalists, but it is to these two generations. And we have to be aware of that. Good compensation, benefits, and perks. Cost of living is very high right now, so this is important to them. Social media, create community is very important to them within the organization that they work for, and being recognized on social platforms. They want to feel like they're part of a club, they're a member of something really cool. That's very important. Or even part of their team, their own team. They love their team. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say in the front line, you know what? I love my team. I don't want to work anywhere else. I love my team. And they may not even love the job very much, but they love their team. So they go into work with enthusiasm. What are we doing when we hire them in the hiring process? We have to sell the vision, not the job. We have to stress how important their job is in contributing to the overall picture. Focus on making sure they're the right cultural fit, right? So that their purpose is aligned with your purpose. Highlighting the flexibility, work flexibility and work balance, very important. And most importantly, development and succession plans spelled out. Maybe I didn't need a succession plan when I came into the workforce in the retail world and in my 20s, in the 90s. It just happened. It just, you kind of made it work and you worked really hard and you kept your head down and you just got promoted and promoted again. It's not like that anymore. People want to understand the direction. They need to understand the direction that they're going in. They need to understand what their progress is continually. That is very, very important. Passion and progress need to be connected. Unlike previous generations, that wasn't important. Manage, but it was. We just didn't voice it. Manage. How do we manage them on a daily basis? Explain the why in everything that you do. Explain how the job relates to the overall goal of the company. More challenges and experiences. Collaborative culture, involving them in decisions, bigger decisions in the organization, the business of the business. More feedback and coaching, making sure you have a systemized coaching program so that they get that regular coaching. Because if they don't, they leave. And how do we retain them? Very simple again. Clear succession plan, making things fast, convenient, mentoring, listening to what they have to say on how we can improve things is really important. More mentoring, more FaceTime, building that connection, building that understanding how you can utilize the value that they bring. And sorry about that. And relationships at work, making sure that you curate your teams, making sure that you put the right people together, that you have, everyone's assets working together in synergy towards a common goal. And building trust, it's so important for them. If you're not authentic, if you're not self-aware as a leader, your managers, if you're not involving them in, discussions about the business, if you're not listening to them, having connective conversations, there's a lack of trust and you will lose them. So these are all things that we can do. And again, it's the emotional side of the business. It's not the rational side of the business. You're all competent in how you run your businesses and how you operate. But as leaders, we need to be very self-reflective. We need to be very introspective on the emotional side of the business, because we bring the energy, we bring
the enthusiasm. And without that, we can't inspire people and we can't create synergies among our team. So let's just stay focused on these things, focus on common goals and priorities with our teams, develop interpersonal leadership skills within our people, respect everyone's personal style and make them feel valued, create collaborative environments, focus on people's assets more than their liabilities, and spend time getting to know the talent. It's absolutely critical to inspiring and retaining our teams. So let's remember, it's not just the ability to run our operations, taking corporate strategy, executing flawlessly through the front line, through millions of directives and initiatives. We know, I mean, how demanding retail is and also how exciting it is in any service environment, retail or service environment, whether it's medical, whether it's frontline, clothing retail, it doesn't matter. When we're in service of other people, it's very demanding. But as leaders, we have to remember that these are people and we need to connect with them. They're human beings that we need to connect and understand them if we're going to get the best out of them. And they all come from a different background. I use generations because it's the generational differences, because it's the easiest way to define differences and diversity within the workplace. So if we remember these four things, then we've got the right mindset as leaders. We always have to be in service of our people. We always have to appreciate the assets they bring, not just focus on their liabilities. Connect. We have to spend more time pulling, not pushing. We have to spend more time listening, active listening, more time understanding why they show up the way that they do so that we know how to get the best out of them and then create that synergy in the team. And most importantly, understanding they all come from a different political, social, economic, cultural background. So you are going to be dealing with a diverse team forever. And it's our job as the leaders to find out why they behave. And that's your managers as well. Everyone in the front line, your assistant managers, your district managers, your VPs, your presidents, understanding the why behind people gets the best out of people. And not assuming, not stereotyping, not leading with our unconscious bias. So again, today was really just about mindset. It was really about being introspective. It was really just about, understanding, how we sometimes show up and that we need to be aware of that. And that's it. I'm not giving you tools to go back and implement in operations, nothing like that today. It was really just to leave today's session and just be aware and use this module today as, a coaching topic with your managers and, with your assistant managers, any of the leaders within the organization, because I think it's a hugely important topic right now. I hear it. I work with so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of frontline people. So how I develop my modules is based on what I hear in the front line. And then I create modules for leaders because I'm their voice. So that's what I hear is I'm not being heard. I'm not understood. I don't understand. When I start hearing all these things, I'm not part of this. I'm not being understood and I'm not being listened to. So that's why we created this module, building synergy from a diverse team is as a reminder to us leaders to really step back. And going back to that activity from the beginning of the module is just really when we're with our people, being present and listening and understanding what they're saying. It's hugely important in our success in building synergetic teams and creating an incredible workplace for our people. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. And I have to apologize. I'm a little under the weather. I feel like I'm coming down with something. So I've been like, and I'm trying to give you as much energy today as possible. But thank you so much for joining me and have an amazing rest of your week. And if you're in Ontario, be careful driving. The weather's getting bad out there. And we hope to see you soon on our Wednesday webinars. See you soon. Bye, everyone.